Welcome back to our Wealthy Mindset, where we talk about all things money, mindset, and business. It's your host, Cindy, your financial bestie and fractional CFO. And I'm excited to announce that today's episode is episode 90. So from now on, episodes will be released every Wednesday. If there were certain topics that you'd like me to go more in depth with, or you have certain questions come up as you're listening to the episodes, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at It's Cindy Kumar. I love your feedback. Any questions you have, I can always go more in depth with things, give you some examples, and provide you with more resources as well. So, like I mentioned, episodes will now be released on Wednesdays. And for this episode that I'm releasing today, I had the opportunity to connect with Raminder Hayer. She is a lawyer, psychic healer, coach, and author who has a unique journey that spans both law and spiritual healing. After years as a lawyer, she felt called to help others align with their true purpose beyond societal structures. Through her coaching, tarot readings, meditations, and transformative group sessions, Raminder supports individuals seeking clarity and renewed purpose in their lives. Her work, including her podcast and the book, Debunking the World We Live in, Unpacking the Matrix and System, aim to illuminate pathways to authentic living and empowerment in today's complex world. In law, Raminder started by working for insurance companies in fraud matters, and now she provides short-form opinion on simple to complex litigation matters. I'm super excited to have Raminder here, so let's get into it. Hi, Raminder. Thank you so much for joining me today on Her Wealthy Mindset. Could you introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Hi, Cindy. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this. My name is Remy or Raminder. People know me as the RKH. There's a lot of different names I go by, but I am a psychic healer and lawyer. I don't really work the conventional path anymore. My main focus now, I just actually went back into practice part-time. Haven't really been taking too many clients on, but I do some unbundled services there, giving kind of like short-term and more realistic opinions about what's your trajectory within the system. And I do psychic healing and coaching full-time. So how I like to explain this to people is like, I'm not a registered therapist or counselor, but a lot of people come to me now in replacement of that. Not saying people should not go to counseling, but the main reason is because I have the psychic knowledge of kind of where the trauma is stemming from, as well as the past life stuff. So get to bring all of that into helping individuals make empowered decisions, whether that's in their business or personal lives. But, we know once we do our self-work and our growth work, that positively impacts everything we do. I'm the author of a book called Debunking the World We Live in. So it's about understanding how our energy impacts the system, as well as our success, and how we're actually able to maintain success in a different way. And yeah, I am a creator and I like to do all things fun, located in Vancouver.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like when you think of a lawyer, you don't think of psychic healing or any of the coaching or the creative side. So how long was it like in your law practice that you realized that you didn't want to go like the full corporate and you wanted to introduce like intuitive coaching and psychic healing? Because when you think of a lawyer, you don't think of psychic healing.
Not at all, right? So this question has a couple of different like folds to it. My awakening, or the start of my awakening, I wasn't really conscious of what was happening at this point, was when I was writing the bar, when I was in PLTC, which is, I mean, as a CPA, right? When you're doing all your qualification stuff at the beginning, that's when I started to really learn more about my intuition. I was going through a divorce at that time, and I was like just going through a lot of life changes and trying to figure out like what my body was telling me. Didn't realize that actually was this like micro start, soft launch into the awakening. And then I got called to the bar. I got a big firm associate job, and it was about maybe like a year into that job, a little bit less than a year, maybe 9 months into that job, that I had a really big catalyst, and I started to question a lot of things in my life. But my switch didn't happen right then when I started to question, because there was so much programming that I had, but also so much effort I put in to getting to where I was. Like, I have my master's ahead of my Juris Doctorate. So I was in school for a while, about like 10 years of post-secondary school, including, then getting called to the bar. And I'm like, I worked really hard. It was a struggle to get there too. Like, it wasn't easy. So for me, it was like, I felt I'm letting go of all of this effort, and the resilience I had, in order to like even consider the spiritual side, let alone me leaving the profession, right? I was like, uh-oh, I don't like having all these questions about my belief system or about my life choices, because this makes me feel gross. It makes me feel weird. But I was preparing for a trial, and I was at the same time trying to figure out what my awakened path was. And at this point, I had already met my current coach, who I've been with now for over 5 years. And she was like, you have these gifts, like you have similar gifts to me. You need to work on them, enhance them. And I was like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to do this. It's overwhelming. But you can't really stop once you start the awakened path, especially for us as like women, that even though we love to be in our feminine, or we've now reprogrammed ourselves to be in our feminine, we're still very alpha, right? We want to be the best at what we're doing. We want to be
Right.
the best at what we know. And so for me, I was like, well, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I need to figure this out, because like, not like anyone was testing me, but it was a little fun and stressful. And at that point, you naturally start to value yourself more when you see how your past decisions have impacted you, right? So
Right.
I was valuing myself, valuing my boundaries, valuing how I wanted to take up space in that corporate world within the system. And I don't want to say it wasn't well received. I just think that they didn't want to give me what I wanted. So I split from that job. And then COVID hit, the plandemic, I call it, the
Yeah.
orchestration. And so the pandemic happened. At that point, I was already 3 interviews deep with like a national firm here. And then I don't know if they didn't hire, they hired somebody else or whatever, but it was a weird time.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of forced to take a couple months off unexpectedly. So I was like, oh, okay. This is now really the time I can dive into what I'm doing spiritually. Because I already had started to like launch that I was doing this sort of work because I was being forced to do it. I was like, I need to get this off my chest. And it was a bigger deal for me than really for anyone that received it.
Yeah.
Right. So, because it was an identity piece. So then I started to talk more about my coaching and take clients on, then ended up, getting my next job in law. And it was a 2-year process for me to get out, 2.5 years. And I don't say get out in a negative sense, but for me to like really realize that the billable life was not going to be for me. And then I did some contract work, went out on my own. And then I was kind of struggling with figuring out the energetics of how to merge the two, because I was trying to live 2 separate lives.
Yeah.
And then I decided like I need to go to non-practicing and focus on my business. So I did that from 2022 to basically a couple of months ago, where I decided to go back part-time. And that was really unexpected for me. So it's been quite an interesting journey. But those 2 years of really curating my brand and focusing on who I am and not caring about what the system is going to think about my opinions was important,
Mhm.
and I think monumental for my growth. Because when I was in practice, I didn't really hold back. But when you are sovereign and you have strong beliefs and you're within a system of any sort, and I had like director roles and chair roles and different organizations at that point,
Yeah.
I was not I was not really getting, I don't want to say getting what I wanted, but I wasn't able to make the change or impact that I was seeking. So I realized I need to do this on my own platform instead. So that was another reason and another way that I was able to lead myself onto a different path, being like, you're making more change on your Instagram than you are, because I already had like a bigger platform then as well. And I would realize like, yeah, this is going to be something that I can tie together. So now it's like law, policy, teaching the energetics of things all combined. But it took years for me to really accept this. And it was only in the beginning of last year, I would say, that I actually felt really secure in the the changes I made.
That's amazing. I can relate to that. I was in the corporate world for about 8, 9 years until I fully realized that it just wasn't for me. I
Hmm.
went through like 4 different firms thinking it
Hmm.
was the firm, everyone promotes that work-life balance, but it's just like the firm life, it doesn't matter where you go, it's always gonna be the same. It's just like you're not allowed to like think for yourself and like have an opinion or like be creative. And that's what I was like really longing, like, how can I make finances and taxes
Mm.
more accessible for women in a way that feels good to me?
In a male dominated system, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it just doesn't
Yeah,
work. I always say
yeah,
it's like you're trying to rebuild on a shitty foundation. Like you have your foundations molding, your framings rotting, and then people are like, let me just put new drywall up. And you're like, no, like the actual bones of this whole structure is falling apart. You can't
yeah.
just put all this new stuff in the interior and try to make it look nice and be like, here's a woman, now here's a brown person, now here's an indigenous person. It's like, it doesn't
Yeah,
work that way. So I really admire what you do and how you vocalize empowerment for women as well as the energetics. I think that you made the right choice
thank you.
in leading as well.
What advice would you give like a woman in like the corporate world right now and like a male dominant industry? She's not really thinking for herself, like blocking her intuition, thinking she's in a climb the corporate ladder, getting the billables, doing all the hustle. Because I know like we've both been in it too, and
Hmm.
it wasn't until we actually like sat down and actually gave ourselves the space to actually reflect on things that we
Hmm.
made the change. So how would you like advise a woman that doesn't have the space to actually think or like validate her feelings and things like it's okay to keep going and climb that corporate ladder?
Yeah. So one thing is I always bring it back to manifestation now, even with my clients. So a lot of my clients are professionals that are going through some sort of awakening or shift that are looking to either incorporate their current profession within what they're doing or make a shift. I have both. Some that have made a complete shift, some that have retired, some that
Wow.
are looking to evolve, right? So when people see me, they're like, you've done it, right? Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
How did you do it? And one thing is I always frame it as manifestation. I'm like, what do you want? Like, what is your ideal of what you want? Write that down. Don't think about any limitations. What is your ideal life? Now, where are you?
Yeah, totally.
Like, you need to really look
Yeah.
hard at what you're tolerating in your life because it's always one step away. It's always, I will do this when, I will
Yeah.
do this when, right? And that's, I think, the hardest part. And in my book, I call it the golden handcuffs, which is not coined by me. I actually heard it through a client once, but I'm sure other people use it. It's like the golden handcuffs is just the security, right? Like having the
Right.
benefits, having um, salary, whatever that is. It's like, oh, this makes me feel safe. But it makes you
Right.
codependent, right? So it's like if you want to be codependent on the system until you retire and you have a pension, and you and I have talked about this like off screen about how we're not into the whole traditional ways that you need to invest your time and money and pension and
Yeah,
TFSAs or like whatever.
totally.
We've talked about that. And it's not like any of you listening are wrong in that, but it's the mindset, right? I'm like, I can make $1 million next year and put that in something and allow that to grow, and that can be my retirement. But everybody is programmed to believe I need to work at this place until I'm 65 years
Mhm.
old and then I'll retire and then I'll have this. Right. And so that programming is intergenerational. It's from, especially us coming from immigrant families, it's from our families, whether that you're first generation, second generation, or whatever. It's hard work is the programming. And so I call us the pivotal generation that's really shifting the way in which we think about wealth as well as in our capacity to like receive that. And the system doesn't allow you to do it really. And that's also why the decision to leave is so hard because then you're sovereign. Then you're relying on yourself. You're off the Ferris wheel of how it's telling you need to climb this corporate ladder. And it's a means to an end. Like when I left that first job, the posting was up the next day. Like we are
Yeah, they don't care.
replaceable. Yeah, we are replaceable, right? So you have to really choose yourself. And that's not going to be in every firm environment. It's not going to be in every business. Like I really honor individuals in my profession specifically right now that I can see who have left the bigger firm environments to create maybe more boutique firms that have actual empathy that and not like other lawyers don't, but that structure their workplace based on that, right? Because they've
Right.
created it. And so you can have it in those areas, but your time is limited. So we have to see how much time are we spending working within the system versus how much time are we spending being able to create what we truly want for our future. And some people are okay with having the status quo, and some people are yearning for more. So my overall piece of advice is you really need to be objective about where you want versus where you are, and how where you are right now is making you feel. And
Mhm.
are you feeling the emotions you would feel if you had what you actually wanted? And working on ways on curating those emotions. And it's important because once you start to up level and you start to ascend, you have to make choices in your life. You have to make decisions in your life, whether that's to do with relationships, romantic, family, friendships, whether that's to do with your career, whether that's to do with where you live, whether that's to do with your habits, your addictions, whatever. And so it goes so much deeper than, do I want to be in this workplace or not? Right. Because
Yeah.
as you know, like, our nervous system is what kind of leads the way in our decisions a lot of the time. And so if you're kind of in combat with your own self, then it's going to be harder to make those decisions. But it's like, you have one life to live. How do you want that to be? Do you want to be answering to somebody for the rest of your life? And if you do, then that's okay. If you want to be in a place where you want to be asking permission to live your life for the rest of your life, that's also okay. Um, and people achieve great things within the system, right? So the system is required, but we're just not yet at the place where it's running in a way that avoids burnout. It's still promoting burnout. And I think that's one of the biggest deterrent for people that want to stay within that space, because they're not getting the work-life balance. They're not getting the time for themselves. They're not getting enough. It's like they're offline, they're on vacation, but then they're expected to be on their phone, right?
Yeah,
They're expected to be
100%.
on email. I think you maybe had said that in a podcast or something. Like, they're expected to be available. And that actually messes up with your subconscious more than anything, because you're never relaxing.
Mhm.
And so people are scared to find those spaces to relax. They're scared to let themselves do that. But working through your intergenerational trauma is really important to actually make better decisions. And I think a lot of people skip that because they
Mhm.
want to stay in that people pleasing. They want to avoid any sort of conflict. And that then extends into how you deal with authority figures in the workplace. So your healing is actually crucial to, like, make those decisions. So that would be the first step of, like, admitting that you need to explore that side of yourself, and then making decisions from a more balanced and like holistic place or lens.
That's super helpful. I think another thing is there's so much fear about what people are going to think. Did you have that fear, like when you're leaving the law practice, starting your psychic healing? Like, what is like the law community or like your friends and family? Like, were they supportive, or was it just like, remember, you worked so hard to like get to this point with like getting into the bar and doing all this? Like, are you sure you want to leave that behind?
Yeah. So one thing about me is that I've always been pretty vocal about who I am and my conviction. And, like, at least I think I know that people believe I make decisions from an informed place. Right? Like, my
Right.
parents were supportive, like, my dad once said to me, like, "You know what you're doing," and I was so shocked to hear that from him, and that was within a couple of weeks before I made the switch. My dad's an engineer. He left conventional engineering to start his own ATM business, so he was doing something really unique,
Oh,
in
wow.
that day and age, and now he has, like, ATMs, like, he has contracts with the city, he does events, he does concerts, like, things like
That's
that, and so it
amazing.
was yeah, it's super cool. So, like, he understood me using my talents, for more than what the system wanted, because he also left. I think for my mom, she works in healthcare. She's a care aide at the Langley Hospital, and people go up to her and say, "I follow your daughter."
Oh,
So,
wow.
it's just like it's an interesting
Yeah.
way for her to be involved in what I do and realize that it's impactful, not like she thinks it's not. Um, extended family, like they always still ask me, so what are you doing with this? Like they just think, doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, like
Yeah.
you're gonna go do this, and like, that's the pinnacle of your success. No, it's not, right? It's like killing people on a daily basis. It leads to addiction. It leads to a lot of other issues.
Yeah.
When people don't know how to regulate it, it's like a whole other conversation. But I was strong in my conviction of what I do. I've also always been really independent, so people's opinions did not deter me,
Mhm.
but I'd be lying if I said I didn't try to hide it, especially when it came to the profession. Like when it first started to happen and I first started to make this shift, I was a little, and I wasn't embarrassed of my talents, but I'm like, the system, my assumption was that they were going to have a perception. So, and people within the system would have a stereotype that would make me look incompetent
Mhm.
in my intellect
Yeah.
or my intellectual capacity. And so I didn't know how to word it and frame it. And I was I had a hard time saying I'm doing psychic healing. Like if I'm talking to a lawyer, I'm talking to a partner at a firm or something like that. And so I had to work through that whole identity piece. And it was in the last year that I stopped feeling weird and gross about it, like to the
Mhm.
point where a couple of months ago I was in Victoria for a conference. There's some Supreme Court of Canada judges there for a Canadian Bar Association event, and I went, and then I'm seated with a couple of provincial court judges that
Oh,
are out
wow.
on the island, and they're like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I'm a psychic healer." And they're like, "What?" And I
Wow.
was like, "Oh, yeah, I wrote a book this year." And they're like, fuck law. Like,
Yeah.
what do you like? I want to know about this, right? And
Yeah.
then I just started joking around. I'm like, now I'm like at my 7-year call mark. So I'm like more confident in who I am, right? When it started to happen, I was a couple years in and I was trying to like make my mark in a different way. But they're like, we don't like care about the law side. Like, we want to know
Oh,
about
wow.
this. And then we were joking around. I'm like, yeah, I can't really bill for my psychic hits in the shower, right? And they're like, no, right? And so we're just joking around. They're like intrigued. And I was like, oh my God. Like I just felt so liberated to be able to sit at a table with judges. And there's like one of the Supreme Court of Canada, um, one of the admin staff at the table that was like talking to me across the table. And I'm like, see, this is going to be a memorable moment, I think, for them to be like, this
Yeah.
was a like a unique exchange, right? Because like if I was just talking about what I did in law and the type of work I did, like they're going to be hearing those things often, right? And
Right.
so that like kind of changed my brain chemistry. And I was really proud of myself in that moment to feel so confident and not ashamed of what I do. And just to explain my book to them. And they're just like, yeah, okay, cool. And so it took me a while, but just to even like backtrack to 2000 and literally 2012, I was also online at that point. I had like a YouTube channel. I used to vlog when I was in Australia. That was like starting 2013 because I did both of my graduate degrees in Australia, and people wanted to like see what Australia was like back here, right? Like my friends and family, and they're like, you should record. And I was already into like fashion and content or whatever. Like, okay, I'll start like a YouTube channel. And at that point, I was like, oh, like, I don't want to be associated with this. Like, I don't want my professional life to be associated with what I vlog about, right? Because I'm just
Yeah.
unfiltered. So it was at that year that I started to filter out into an alias. I went by Rumi Hayes. So a lot of people will know me
Yeah.
by Rumi Hayes still. And so I started to go by Rumi Hay on everything. Mm, my brain, like I can't relax clearly because I'm like, okay, it's going to take so many years for Google to filter out my legal name. I
Yeah.
don't want, and then it like went where it was like on the 5th page, and I was like, okay, this is like better. And then it was a moment where I was getting interviewed for the farmers' protest on CBC,
Yeah.
where I was like, where they're like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Fuck."
What do I tell them?
Shit. Yeah. I was like, shit. I'm a lawyer and I don't go by Rumi Hay as a lawyer. They're gonna be announcing me as a lawyer and
Yeah.
an activist. And people are gonna try to search Raminder Hayer lawyer on social media and she's not there.
Yeah.
So this was 2020. And I was like, so then I had to change my name. And then I was like, no, this is you. And I didn't
Yeah.
realize that I was trying to split my soul into half.
Yeah.
So it was like this curation of my image has been going on for a long time. And it's not that I'm not authentic, but it was like I didn't want them to see the most authentic version of me because I felt like it was unacceptable. And then that was just something, like I said, in the last 2 years that I really had to work through and be like, "Remember, you're meant for more, you're meant to create more,
Hmm.
you're meant to do more, you're not meant to be the status quo person." And I think having other professionals, right, as clients or other people reach out to me in the system and say that they're empowered by my authenticity, like
Yeah.
that's irreplaceable to get those sort of comments, right? Or seeing like someone like yourself that's really authentic in the way that she posts and talks about, you know, money, wealth, frequency. We're creating a path for the new generation to just do things different. And so it's been
Yeah,
a journey.
definitely.
Definitely cared about the judgment and the stigma. I've definitely got the questions, but none that have actually made me question my decision because I know how much happier I am with the decision. I mean, outside of all the hardships that came with making that shift.
And how did like the law firms take it? Like I know you practicing like part-time right now. Like did you bring that up that you do like psychic healing and like coaching or do you still keep it separate from who
I
you
work for myself.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So, I've kept my law corporation active for the last few years that I wasn't practicing. I mean, like my taxes or whatever, but not my like I wasn't actually practicing or taking clients on. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's no way that I would be in a firm, and not in the like just simply because I want to have control over my time. That's why. I
got
feel
it. Yeah.
confident in asserting myself now, and I wouldn't say no to, like, a contracted opportunity in, like, an investigation matter or something like that simply because I don't wanna be litigating files. It's too much for my energy. It's too like, being a healer and an empath, I because just litigation is dispute related. It's never something exciting. It's never something
Right.
happy, right? You're always dealing with this anxiety, and as an empath, it's way too much for me to absorb it, and then to have all this uncertainty of, like, how long am I gonna be tied to this for?
Right.
So that's why I'm doing short-term stuff, but if I got the opportunity to be in a firm for something really specific, like I said, to do an investigation or to work on some research or something, I would not say no to that, but I would not be able to go into a firm part-time and do the billable thing. Like, for me, it's like,
Yeah,
yep,
not worth
I
it.
will, yeah, like, just kinda curate the sort of work that I wanna take on. Um but to answer kind of that question, it's and I had my lawyer friend on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about this because she's started to become really vocal in her uh not in her beliefs, but like she's been vocalizing her beliefs more as well as like why equity is needed within our professions.
Yeah,
And we were just talking about how, a lot of firms would just want you to take it down a notch. Her firm doesn't, thankfully. But if you especially as a woman, right? If you're out there, you're
yeah,
assertive, you're vocal, there's going to be that natural desire for the system to shut you up in whatever way that
100%.
is,
Yeah,
right? They're gonna be like, "Nope, don't talk about how the patriarchy exists. Don't talk about how we
yeah.
got here." And that's with women and men or any demographic because women have the internalized misogyny.
Mhm.
Um, Regardless of their skin color, the men are programmed with this belief, whether or not they realize it. Everybody has a choice to dismantle those beliefs, and they do. But like I said, it's the molding foundation.
I totally agree because even on the accounting side, I've had so many DMs, emails from, like, other accountants telling me I shouldn't be sharing, like, the information I'm sharing or showing up, like
Really?
yeah, or showing up just as me and sharing my thoughts on things, which is wild.
Okay, so I wanna hear a little bit about that. Like,
Yeah.
is it because you're sharing more that wealth is a frequency or that like do they feel you're deterring people from going into the traditional environments to seek guidance? Like what?
I think it's a bit of both because I do bring up, like, the mindset work and, like, I'm more, like, nurturing when it comes to clients, and
Mhm.
it's more than tax filing to me, like, I feel like I'm fully supporting their business and, like, in their corner, and, like, I just go out of my way for, like, all the clients that I
Yep.
work with. So even, like, on discovery calls, I get women saying, like, "I feel heard for the first time," I've been dealing with accountants where they just ask me for my documents, tell me how much I'm paying, and don't talk to me until the next year. They're basically treating them like as a transaction.
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
If I can say that, you're my accountant. I was like praising
Yeah.
you because I was like, yeah, I really have never, honestly, I'll give you your flowers right now where they're due. Like I really genuinely like meant those comments I said to you about how heard and seen I was feeling and just sharing so openly and vulnerably, and your responses and just your like how you run everything, your speed, like it's all there. And
Yeah.
we don't get that in legal profession, and you don't get that in
The
accounting. Like
corporate, because
you just don't.
yeah.
And
And
that's
you're
based on
passed from
Mhm.
person to person too.
Yeah. Like I know that from personal experience with other accountants, and I know that just by knowing how opposing counsel was annoying, or how, me dealing with certain law stuff has been annoying for myself or other, colleagues of mine. It's like for us it's just a standard of care, right? So when people are
Right.
seeing that you're calling it out, they're projecting because they're like, I
Yeah.
do that, but you're not sitting there writing their name on a wall saying this person from this place is doing this. So
Yeah,
the trigger is
totally.
necessary for them. Well, how do you respond in those moments?
I just respond like with just like I'm just doing what feels good to me. Like I left the corporate world for a reason. You're more than welcome to share accounting and tax tips on your page too. But it's like they just have this fear, and like most accountants, like I've been looking at their pages and stuff. Just like typical tax filing deadlines, RSP deadlines,
Yeah.
don't see like much in tips. A lot of them don't even show like their faces. Like that comes to for bookkeepers too. Like I
Yeah.
find they have like generic stuff on their page, but it's like you have to dig to even find the person's like first name or find a picture.
Yeah.
There's
See, yeah, they're triggered by you showing up,
yeah,
right? And you always talk about this of like showing up consistently. And so you're consistently putting your face to your name and being open about your belief system, and it's just not common, right? And so people in
right.
our professions are very triggered by us showing up authentically, really speaking about what they're thinking, but then also being afraid that they're gonna maybe have some repercussion for that, even though you're not targeting anybody in what you're saying. So, I mean, I'm not surprised, but it is still like surprising that
Yeah. I
they'd
just tell
want
myself
to.
I'm doing something right if people are so
Exactly.
triggered.
Yeah. Got to reprogram.
Yeah. And then what do you think like women in professional roles, like if they want to be coached by you or like want to start that process, do you recommend like starting with like journaling what they really want in life, or like what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I actually just switched my business model to only do packaged clients. And
Okay.
the reason I switched my business model, and I've I was posting about it on my stories and my page, and I had emailed some of my clients, but I'm not going to say no to like clients that have already been with me for years to do these single sessions. But the main reason is because people will come to me and then they'll want the insight, they'll want the predictions, right? But like, this is no offense to psychics down the street that work in a crystal shop, because I've had many readings in those environments too, but it's a lot different than going for a 30-minute tarot reading on the corner because you're intrigued by it. It's like we're doing a whole reframing, right? And that can't be done in a session. If you're coming to me for the first session, I'm getting to know a lot about you. The questions I ask are very tailored for me to start to understand where your energy is, as well as maybe where certain blocks are, or where your intergenerational patterns are holding you back, or your past life stuff. So a lot of people will come, they'll want the insight, but they don't do the follow through.
Got it. So they're not
So
willing to put the work.
yeah, or they're like, okay, well, I want to know, like, is this relationship going to work out? And then I'll talk about like, well, I'm always like, well, you're not where you want to be because there's something that needs to shift, right? Usually. So here
Right.
are the things that need to shift. And if they're not making the shift, then they're coming back to me 6 months later. Like, by the way, I'm like, why are you still here? Like,
Yeah.
and so now I'm like, no, like I like to do the package clients because I get to hold them accountable. I get to check in on them. We have instant messaging. So they have their own server with me, and it helps me keep a track of them, as well as like allows me to yell at them when I need to. So I'm like, nope, like, why are you doing this? Right. Like, we have a really good rapport, right? So
Right.
we're able to be informal about getting them to where they want to be, or for me to consistently be checking in, like, okay, like, no, that's an old belief. We don't believe that anymore. Let's reframe. Let me work through this. And I don't get to do that on one-on-one calls. So working with me in general would mean, you're making the investment to be with me for at least 3 to 4 months, or, longer, depending on what we're feeling. But the kind of beginning stages are, yeah, journaling is great, as well as at the beginning, I was saying making those lists, right? And
Right.
a lot of people want to manifest like the right relationship. Like, okay, what are the 100 qualities you want in a partner? And what are 100 qualities that you think are great about you that a partner would seek? You need to make, they need to
Yeah.
match. People are like, I can't think of 100 things. I'm like, well, then you're not ready for a relationship,
Wow.
right? Like if
Yeah.
you can't think of 100 things that are admirable about you, but you can only think about them for this
Other
hypothetical
person.
person you want, your self-concept needs to have some reframing. So I do a lot of work around that because I call it an energy timeline. And I explain this in my book. It's like, I always say the notches on our energy timeline, like everything impacts each other. It's like it's our career, it's our personal life, our family life, our self-care, relationships, everything's connected positively or negatively, right? The domino will
Right.
impact everything eventually. And so if you're not happy in one area, you'll end up being unhappy in other areas, or you'll overcompensate and then you'll burn out. Or if you are happy, then it's going to naturally shift things. Doesn't mean that's easy. It's just going to mean you're going to have different boundaries and a different lifestyle. So I always get people to look at that. And that's where people get stuck because they don't want to make the changes. They want to stay exactly where they are and they want to achieve this growth and success. I'm like, it's actually impossible because you're not the person that has those things, right?
Right.
Um, so it's assessing where in your life is making you feel drained or down. And now I'm like posting a lot more on my Substack. So I put all my courses on my Substack, which is like your authentic self, how to heal yourself, and work through, your father wounding and intergenerational issues, as well as like how to learn to love again, like teaching yourself tarot. I have my walking on eggshells course, which is like how is
Wow.
people pleasing impacting all these different areas of your life, and how do you manifest better. And then I have like a bunch of other videos about, enhancing your intuition and stuff. So that's also another place where people can start. And now I put all my like extended videos on there, and I have all my ebooks on there too, minus my human design stuff. So I've tried to streamline that, to make it more accessible. But some people want to invest just to get the answer they want. And then they're like, okay, like, you're never going to get the answer you want when you come to me. It's not gonna happen.
You have to put in the work.
You got to put in the work. And then eventually, if you're making those changes, you'll get the answer you want because I'll tell you that you're close. And like I said, we're breaking so many patterns when we
Mhm.
are doing this work. So the resistance makes sense, but also you can't want better and then avoid doing the work to get there.
I think it's that instant gratification. We want things right away versus like putting in the work and time.
Mhm. Like I gotta reframe, I gotta
Yeah.
redo, I gotta revise. And what I think is really hard for our generation, and I have difficulty with this because we are that pivot right now, is
Yeah.
we're still dealing with the brunt of all the crap from our parents and grandparents' generation. And we're making those changes, which is really hard because we have to deal with the brunt of it. And we're also seeing the positive results. So it is hard because, like, our kids will have a different, and this is no shade to our parents, right? Like, they're also so
Yeah.
resilient. Um, but, or at least, my situation, I don't speak for everyone, but it's like our kids will benefit from us making that pivot, right? They'll
Yeah.
benefit in the way that they're programmed. They'll benefit in the way they're taught about money, what they're taught
Yeah.
about money, right? Like all
Right.
those little words that even I see my cousins say those programming things to their kids, and I'm like, oh,
Oh
like
my
money
gosh.
doesn't money doesn't grow on trees. Go wash your
Yeah.
hands. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, no, no, not my battle. Right? So it is this crazy shift, and it makes sense why people don't want to do that work because then they'll have to question a lot more than
Mhm.
just what they've been taught. But I'm really like with intention wanting to work with people and working with people that are willing to make that change, that have a true sense of um, conviction in their purpose and in their path, and that are like, I will not stop at anything to get
Right.
there. And because I've not stopped at anything, like
Yeah.
I just left, another marriage because it was getting in the way of of what I really needed to create for myself. And there were so many things involved in that, but like, these are very difficult decisions that had to be made in part because of my career. And it's harder for people with children, right, to time
Mhm.
manage, to make certain decisions. And again, it all comes down to the individual person's like will to do it, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the healing journey is like never ending.
Oh, we heal until we die, right?
Yeah.
People, I'm healed. I'm healed. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, you're not, because there will be something
Yeah.
else that comes up in your life that will trigger you,
Yeah.
and you're healed to a certain extent. But like, we never graduate in our healing. And a lot of people will just bypass whatever is not. They're like, oh, let me just go around. And then it'll show
Yeah.
up again. There's like another pothole down the road. But we learn tools on how to deal with the triggers, right? We learn how to
Right.
regulate ourselves and then be like, okay, like this is just a part of the path, right? It's a part of the lesson.
Yeah, I feel like you've healed a certain part of you, and all of a sudden a trigger comes up and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
still haven't resolved this."
Hmm. And I always tell my clients, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, you're sitting here across from me and I go through this too,
Yeah.
right? Or if there's like an astrological thing going on, like I always try to tell them like, hey, yeah, like you guys are all telling me what's going on right now, but I've also been facing it. I've also had to do
Mhm.
the same thing. And it kind of gives them more of like a realistic look at like, okay, we're always evolving. I'm like, just because I'm sitting here doing this work doesn't mean that I'm not having to face certain things in my life. They become less the
Yeah.
more in alignment you are, but like we can't control what the next generation would do, right? I can't control what my kids would decide to do necessarily. If they
Yeah.
trigger me because of a life decision and I have to work through that, like we only have so much leeway. Right, we can only control what we can control, and the rest of it we have to just deal with along the way.
Yeah, I feel like there's this like inner dialogue where you want to control everything external, but you can only control your reaction to things externally.
Yes. Yes, exactly, not getting caught up in it, and the closer we are in proximity to a relationship or the more kind of activated that trigger is, it's the bigger our reaction may be, and that's okay, right? Because then when we recognize that, it's like, "Oh, okay, this is still bothering me. Like, what can I do in my life to ensure that this doesn't dictate my mood anymore?" Especially when it's something that's always happening or a part of the dynamic versus like you had a very traumatic event,
Yeah.
right? Like those events are not something that we can control. Like people are always going to pass away. That's just a part of life. Um, I just mean in general, if you have a specific dynamic with a boss, a partner, a parent, a friend, that dynamic will kind of be that way. I mean, you can manifest your way out of that dynamic,
Yeah.
um, but people are scared of having changes in their relationships too.
I think there's also a fear to vocalize like how you're feeling too.
Hmm. Yeah, because again, authenticity.
Yeah.
It's showing up, right? It's like the people pleasing. If I say how I feel, what is the outcome? What is my punishment for being open about this? And my niece and I were talking about this the other, actually, a year younger than me. But I was like, we give so much grace in our romantic relationships that we expect, like, sometimes we just expect things to be more perfect or less tumultuous in like friendships and family. I'm like,
Yeah.
or we give like it could be flipped as well, right? It's like we speak up more on the romantic relationship side because we expect more from that person, but then when it comes to friends and family, like we're continuously giving them chances to cross our boundaries, right? But sometimes when it
That's
comes
so
to
true.
a
Yeah.
relationship, you're like, oh my god, you crossed my boundary again, like let's work through it again. And that's why a lot of people stay stuck. It actually impacts your manifesting huge, because one of the reasons why a lot of triggers come up in your romantic relationships is, and this is not like determining whether or not it's a good or bad relationship or aligned or not, um, is because we heal a lot of our parental wounding through the romantic relationship, because that's just how we're programmed. So we we want to do more. We want to fix all those things that were not perfect within childhood. We want to nurture those emotions. But some people do that to their detriment, right? And then they're like, oh, well, I'm willing to take more here
Yeah.
because I've achieved this thing that maybe, has been put on a pedestal. But then when it comes to our friends or it comes to our parents, we're more critical of it. And then, the second chances or not. So all of this plays a huge role actually in like I said, what you're able to manifest.
Wow. I just learned something new today.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I never thought it was like a parental wound.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is because you're exploring new parts of yourself. And a lot of the time your relationships will manifest again from a past life. So if you had some issues in a past life with somebody, they're going to come up again. And those roles could be reversed. Maybe your husband was a parent in the past life. Maybe your parent was your husband in your past life, right?
Wow, that's
You're coming
interesting.
to yeah, you're coming to clear all this karma. And I always say, it doesn't mean you're incestuous. It's just the way the energy works because you're meant to heal something. You're meant to grow. But a lot of people will try to escape the traumas that they faced growing up from whomever or whatever, maybe not even from their parents, right? Could have been an external situation where they were harmed, and
Yeah.
they'll try to fix that through the relationship. Like, and it comes down to the self concept. So if your self concept and your value and belief in yourself is not strong and it's not solid, you're going to allow more energy leaks, which means that you're going to lower your vibration, and that actually impacts you from being able to make money, right?
Wow.
Because you're
Yeah.
in more of that resentment phase. I always say the bottom of the triangle, the resentment, the fear, the anger. So the gratitude is like, I try to tell people, I try to do this too, is like 5 pieces of gratitude every day. And things that you wouldn't even think to be grateful for. Oh, I had my cup of coffee. Oh, I'm so glad
Mhm.
it was sunny out. Right? Like these things that it's not like, oh, I went and bought this new bag, right? Like, no.
Yeah, surface
Right?
level
Like
stuff.
I was able to go and buy the groceries I needed. Like keeping that vibration high and seeing how you're able to attract helps your self concept, because we let ourselves go a lot, right? Especially when we are like, oh yeah, like I got to the point of where I want to be. I'm just going to relax and let myself go. And then we don't really
Yeah.
stick to the routine of what we need to do. But they say like you're as good as you are on your worst day. So
Yeah.
it's like trying to maintain that routine and structure will also actually help elevate your relationships. It helps you meet yourself where you're meant to be and for other people to meet you there. And you kind of just have to be okay with the leaves falling where they're meant to. We get really stuck on these contracts, right? Like,
Right.
this is the definition of this relationship. This is the definition of like what this is meant to mean. But it's like you need to evolve and grow together. And that's where it gets to be really hard. And that's, eventually you leak enough energy. And in my book, I explain it as like a deflated balloon. It's like if you keep on poking at the balloon, eventually it's going to deflate. And
Yeah.
then you're at the lowest vibration possible. You're not able to manifest from that space. So you need to be able to fill yourself up with all that air again,
Mhm.
which is the self love. And that's the hardest part for people to like. That's where a lot of people I see have a hard time standing of like, okay, I need to give all this to myself, because then they still have all the noise of everybody else trying to
Yeah.
get at them, to poke at them, to siphon their energy. Um, but like people may not think it has to do with their accounting or what they're making in the bank, but it does. It does.
How does someone work on, like, their self-concept? Let's say, like, they're in a really low place.
Affirmations are huge. Daily affirmations, so with your value, right, your embodiment, um what would, just like the other objective list, what does a version of you that has it all do in her day? What is her routine or his routine?
Mhm.
What does she feel? What are her relationships like? And you have to adjust. You essentially have to wake up and put this suit on of like, okay, Does a version of me work out every day? Does a version of me have a good diet? Does
Mhm.
this version of me care about her appearance? Does this version of me act kind? Does she have this good routine? Like, you have to manifest opposite.
Got it.
You
Yeah,
have
and
to
you
start.
kinda have to believe it before you
Yeah,
see it.
and eventually it becomes your belief. It may take a couple of weeks,
Mhm.
but a lot of people don't appreciate, like, the power of your words and your affirmations because a lot of people will just say, "Oh, I'm broke. Ugh, I'm so sick all the time. Ugh, I'm so
Yeah.
tired." Right? And then the universe like, "Okay, bet. Like, let's just give you more of that." Because
Yeah.
they're just listening, right? Like, they're just
Right.
receiving in this radio and regurgitating your beliefs back to you. And then a lot of people will say, "Well, but that's not me. That's not that I don't do this." And I'm like, "So you're only going to believe it once you see it. That's not how manifestation works."
Yeah, totally.
Right? And sometimes I explain it as a TV. It's like you're programming whatever, like you have a DVD or a VHS or a USB or a SD card, you're programming it. You don't know what you're programming it with yet, or you don't really know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And you're saying this, saying this, saying this, saying this, you're on loop, and you put it into the TV or on your computer, and then you're like, a lot of people are surprised at what video they're watching. I'm like, so
Yeah.
what was your belief system when you're programming that? It's not just going to show you the opposite, right? You're not gonna, like, put in Lion King and expect to watch Harry Potter, like, it's just not gonna happen.
It doesn't add up. Yeah.
It doesn't add up, so I'm like, you really have to, like, believe what you're putting in there and know that it will pick that up eventually because everywhere we're sitting right now is old and dead energy. Like,
Yeah.
we've already manifested where we're sitting. A prime example is, 3 weeks ago, we sat down to do this podcast, and now we're doing the podcast, right? Like, that's a
Right.
objective way of looking at it. We already manifested this moment, right? But when
Right.
it comes to people's beliefs about maybe their abundance or their relationship, things that maybe seem a little intangible or achievable, they're like, "Oh, well, I don't really have the guarantee that it's going to happen." But you have to have that level of conviction of like, "Yes, I'll put it in my calendar and we're sitting down at 11 a.m. today to do this." Like that's what we're doing. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily the relationship's going to come on that exact day, but like you have to prepare for it. You have to make space for it. And a part of making the space is you need to get rid of what's not aligned.
Yeah, I totally see that, especially with women, they wanna manifest, like, the $1,000,000, but
Mhm.
all their actions are putting them into debt.
Yeah, like I want to manifest $1 million by staying in the toxic relationship, by not setting boundaries, by not moving, by not putting the energy in. I just want it to come to my door. And
Yeah.
it doesn't start coming to your door until you start doing the self concept work, where this is like the natural belief of your subconscious. Like, because that voice in your head is your subconscious, and your brain is a sponge. So you can always change your brain chemistry, but your programming is something that you've already had for decades, and 0 to 7 is when you get 95% of your programming. So by this repetition is actually what's reframing like decades of programming. So it is going to take time for it to completely release, and it may not completely release. It's like every time we up level, we may have a new fear that comes up or
Yeah.
this new memory that comes up to try to make the outcome predictable or to try to get us off path because it feels scary. But that's why the consistency is really important, because a lot of the time when people start to see one of the results, they fall off and like, oh, well, it's working now.
Yeah. And
Oh,
they
yeah,
just
this is,
stop.
yeah, they stop. So you have to continue because, like I said, eventually it's going to manifest. And then, like, your continuation through the period of it waiting allows the next manifestation to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's like staying really true to your affirmation and belief of yourself for even the first couple of weeks to a month. You're going to start to see the changes. You're going to start to feel better. You're going to start to look different. Probably you're going to see yourself differently. You're going to see that there are different opportunities or people magnetized to you. And discernment also becomes big there, right? You're kind of just expecting things to happen in the positive way, and
Right.
then picking up what is going to work and not, because when you become magnetic, there's more things that want you, right? And so you get to choose, like, okay, yeah, now I have decisions, and now I don't have to be desperate for the first thing that comes along.
Right.
um, so yeah, the self concept work is huge. Meditation is really big, and people don't like to meditate. The most common thing I hear from my clients or anybody really is like, "Oh, I don't like to meditate because I have so many thoughts. There's so many things in my head." I'm like, that's exactly why you need to meditate, because like all you're doing every day is getting a new thought or getting new thoughts, and it's a
Yeah.
dumpster pile, and it keeps piling on top of it. And when you visit the manifestation or the meditation or whatever you're doing, you're seeing the dumpster pile, and you're like, this is too much. And the next day, you're like, I'm just going to throw this thought on top too.
Yeah.
But what you need to do is you need to keep revisiting it. So every single time that pile is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually, after your consistency, you're not met with all those thoughts. And those thoughts are what your subconscious wants you to know is holding you back a lot of the time,
Wow.
or
I've been
what's clearing out.
avoiding meditating because
Oh,
of
well,
that.
there you go.
Now I'm
So
gonna have to try
it's just,
it.
and it was very hard for me. I've been meditating now for years, and now I can meditate with frequency like all evening. But it used to be very hard for me to do that. It used to be very hard for me to sit still and be in that space. So I really resonate. But it is consistency that just helps you, because your mind wants you to declutter. Right? It's like
You're
people
right.
will take everything out of the closet and they're like, "Oh, now I'm too tired to actually organize." But you got to take it all out in order for you to see what gets to stay, right? Or what
Right.
you can kind of repurpose or whatever. So yeah, get on the
Wow.
meditation.
Definitely gonna start that tomorrow morning.
Okay, good.
I feel like we could talk hours for this. But what's the best way for like the audience to connect with you and also learn more about your book? I'll share
Yeah.
all your details in the show notes as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so all my social media is under the RKH. My Instagram, my website is therkh.com. If anyone wants to work with me, then they're able to go through the contact form there or the coaching link there, and fill it out, and it'll send me or my assistant an email about, like, all the details. I also have a book link there. My book's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. I'm currently releasing my book in or on Spotify. So I recorded the Audible. So every single week
Oh
there's a
wow,
new
that's
chapter
awesome.
going up on my Spotify, and it will be on Audible eventually. Just trying to work out some logistics, and it will be in some local bookstores in the Lower Mainland soon. So all that information will be updated on my website when it is available in person. And then I want to do, like, some book signings and kind of meet and greet stuff later this year. But yeah, the RKH on basically anything, and I'm very responsive. So even if someone sends me a DM, I'll eventually get to that DM if it's coaching related or, yeah, services related, and hopefully we'll have some people reach out. It's
Yeah, for
resonated
sure.
with.
I feel like I've learned so much today too, just with our
Oh, I'm so
conversation.
glad.
And I love like your content. You're really vocal about like your opinions, your thoughts. So if you want good information on like just mindset stuff, definitely follow
Oh,
Raminder on Instagram.
thanks, Cindy. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.